Okay. Well, it's a quiet crowd this morning. I should have had some comedian come in and warm you up a little bit before I get up here, you know. All right, maybe that's my job. Let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we're grateful this morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be together with our loved ones and to study and read. Bless the reading of your word today in Christ's name. Amen. All right, we're in book of 1 Peter and chapter 2, and I think we can get here. So we have begun this section. This is not exactly the right slide, but this section in chapter 2 about abstaining from fleshly lusts. And we talked about this one last week, so I want to read, but I don't want to go back over it too much. Beloved, I beg you, in 1 Peter 2:11, I beg you as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. And we said that he was presenting these Christians, not as Jews or as Gentiles, but Christians as distinct from Jews and Gentiles, as foreigners. The land you're living in your society, whatever city you're in, you're a foreigner there because you're a Christian. You don't live by the same understanding and rules that they do. You have a different nationality now. Your nationality is Christian. That's kind of what he's saying. And he said because of that, because of the way strangers are viewed and aliens are viewed in any culture at any time, you need to abstain from fleshly lusts which war against. You can't just live any way you want to because you're already under a microscope as a Christian. So you need to have your conduct honorable among the Gentiles. You know, Christians don't think a thing in the world about one of their friends committing adultery. But if you do, it's the end of the world to them, right? Because you're a Christian. Their friends lie to them all the time, but if you tell a lie, it's a big deal to them. Well, we may not like that. That seems unfair, but this is exactly what Peter's saying. That's the way people are. So if you're going to call yourself a Christian, which the world knows that means you have high moral standards, they know that you should have high moral standards, they're going to hold you to that. Even if they themselves don't live up to it, they're going to hold you to it. And that's just the way it is. So we have to live with that. So you have your conduct honorable. So that when they speak against you as an evildoer, oh, these Christians are hateful, hypocrites, they're this, they're that. Like I always say, they're going to say this about you. But in reality, they're going to see that you do good things. And when they do that, some of them are going to glorify God in the day of visitation. When times get hard, when things get rough on them, they're going to come to you to find out how to live. They're going to ask you how to live because you've shown them an honorable life. Other times when things get hard, they persecute Christians. This isn't a universal statement that if you do this, that people will always say nice things about you, but it's true. You need to be the person that's living a stable, honorable life so that somebody who is searching can find out where to go, find out what to do to be saved, find out what to do and how to live. You need to be that person. And so this is the chart we gave. But I want to move on then. I may have a comment about that. I want to move on because he goes on and says, therefore, in the next verse. So now we're going to move on to this next section, which is you need to be subject to the laws that you live under. This fits with the other thing. Christians were accused from earliest times, from the time before while they were still in Judea. They were accused of being lawbreakers, accused of being rebellious lawbreakers. And the truth is, in its own way, Christians do live by a different law than other people, don't they? I live by a different law than my neighbors. Why would I say something like that?
You live by what the Bible says, that law.
I live by God's law, fundamentally.
And you live under a civil law, but you can break a civil law if it interferes with God's law.
Yes, if forced to, I will break the civil law. But I shouldn't do it unless I'm forced to.
Oh, yeah.
That's what he's saying here. So we have to understand, we have a different king. Caesar is not our king. We have a king, Jesus Christ. What does our king tell us to do, though? Our king says, submit to Caesar. That's what it says. Okay? That's what this verse says. Now, can you always do? No, look, folks, we have to grow up. There's no always in anything. There's hardly, even when you say always about anything, there's always something that's not there. So grow up. There are times when Christians must break the law. But they can't start off with that as the premise. I'm a Christian, so I don't have to live under it. I can be sovereign. I can do what I want to do. No. Peter's very clearly telling you here that's not the way Christians should. Now, why? Why would he say that? Well, he's going to say that because if you live that way, you will certainly not be respected by the country you live in and by the people around you. You will be disrespected completely by that if you do that way. And you see this, and we can. I don't even want to discuss the merits. I don't even want to discuss. Well, we can. We can discuss anything here. But I'm saying I'm not really trying to open up a discussion of the merits of this topic. But before World War II, a huge percentage of Christians, especially conservative Christians, were pacifists. They did not believe in fighting in carnal warfare. They didn't believe in Christians being active military combat soldiers. Many of them did not believe in policemen being Christians or anything like that before World War II. And you can go back further and you can show me maybe there's examples. But that was common among Christians in the United States. And many can, all right, some of you are old enough to remember. There's a famous American hero who was of this opinion. Anybody remember his name? He's the most heroic. He was the biggest hero in modern American history for a long time. And then he became an outcast.
Sergeant York, wasn't it?
No, I'm thinking of Charles Lindbergh. You all heard of Charles Lindbergh, haven't you? Birdman and Flag? Oh, he's a great American hero. What's the matter? What I miss? I missed something because Bob left.
No, I was saying Alvin York, I thought you were going to talk about him because he had refused to fight and then he changed his mind.
I know the story, but I'm not as familiar with it. But you're right. The same thing, Bob. That's a good example. Charles Lindbergh, great American hero, was a pacifist. We should not get involved in World War II. It's not our fight. Didn't want to fight. Now, then all of a sudden his reputation went through the floor. Jehovah's Witnesses, for example.
Charles Lindbergh ended up fighting. He actually flew combat missions in the Pacific.
Well, he probably gave in. He didn't want us to get involved, and that cost him a lot. He may have, but the point is, his reputation is damaged by that. Jehovah's Witnesses, they're generally a peaceable people. We may not like them knocking on our door, but they don't cause any problems in society, do they? Are they generally decent people? Well, yes, they are, generally speaking, the ones I've met. And, of course, you find all bad examples. But why do people, what's one of the reasons people don't like them? From my experience growing up, they don't like them because they refuse to serve in the military. They refuse to be drafted. They fight the military conscription. They fight the selective service. They were very much against that. And so the common people in society turned against them in World War II because of that. And a lot of their negative things that people feel about them now are carryovers from their pacifism because it goes against the grain of the common culture. Now, my point I'm going to discuss my point is that there are when you are viewed as a Christian of someone who will not obey the common laws of the land, you're going to be despised by the people there. If we are perceived as people who will not obey the law, that we're above the law, then that's going to be the problem. And you can't escape it. It's always been true. Christians, when they said Caesar's not our king, Jesus is our king, that's why they put Jesus to death. What was the accusation? If you support Christ, you're not a friend of Caesar. And the Jews said, okay, never mind, kill him. Because that's the general gist of things. So Peter is saying here, as much as possible, you need to obey the laws of the land that you live in. And the truth is, and especially in a country like the United States, where we can have a part in the political process, and we're not ruled, well, not entirely, by one viewpoint all the time, one person, that we generally can obey the laws of the land. I don't like that the speed limit is 25 miles an hour in River Drive. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. It causes more problems than it solves. But what should I do when I'm on Indian River Drive? I should drive the speed limit, or as close as I humanly possible to that speed limit. It's less safe. It's not as safe as the. But anyway, see, in this country we can argue about that. I don't like taxes of many kinds. What should I do when it's time to pay taxes? I should pay taxes. And if I want to fight about it, I take that fight to the legislature or somebody else. I don't take up the fight on my own. Now this is hard for people. And I think, see, as Americans, we don't like it for two reasons. Number one, nobody likes to do that. But secondly, we've been taught this independence, and so we chafe against it. That's a good thing. I like that. I like Americans being a little bristly about government regulations. I think most of us should be bristly like porcupines about government regulations of any kind. Why? Because the government's job is to control you, and there's a whole bunch of your countrymen who want to control you, and this is how Christians get persecuted. So we should be bristly about that because it always leads to persecution and immoral things. But, on the other hand, you can be bristly, but you still got to obey. That's the problem that we have. And so Peter goes on, here's what he says. Said all that, didn't even read the verse. Therefore means look backwards to what I said before. Have your life honorable among the Gentiles, so when they accuse you of wrong, that they don't have a good leg to stand on. Therefore submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme, or to governors, or to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. Submit. Therefore submit. The word submit in Greek, hupostasso, literally means, and so words have literal meanings, concrete physical world meanings. Like somebody's running for president. Where are they running to? Well, running is a physical act of running, but it's been made into an abstract form to run for president. You get a run in your stockings. Is it really running? No, it's a run. It's the same meaning, only now it's been made into an abstract concept. Submission is the same thing. Submit literally means to place yourself under, to put under something. So there's an order of authority in societies and in marriages and in the home. There's orders, and you literally place yourself underneath something. So when I take something and I rearrange it so it's in alphabetical order, and I put the C's under the B's, the C is in submission to the B, literally in Greek, because it's underneath. Or in an outline form, you have point Roman numeral 1, you have A, B, C, and so the A's are underneath the 1s, because that's the order it goes in. Submit to the order. So in this, he says, now it came to mean mostly by the time the New Testament was here, it came to be, as much as anything else, a military kind of term of rank, of submitting to a rank. Someone is above you, you're in the lower rank, you submit yourself to that person of a higher rank than you. It doesn't mean that you're less of a person because you submit. Most of you have jobs where you have a boss. Even if you're self-employed, you have a boss. It's a worse kind of boss, probably, because it's you. So, do you think you're less of a human being because you go to work and the boss says, I need you to be here at 9 o'clock, and you go? Are you a less human being? You don't think that. He doesn't think that. He just says, I'm the boss, so you submit, you place yourself under my authority, and you do that. We live by this. This is how all human societies are built this way. Every home is built this way. Every club you're in is built this way. I'm in several different clubs. They have a president, a vice president, and I'm just a member, so I have to listen to what they say, and here's the rules you go by, and all that. We don't think about that very much. That's submission. That's all it is. So when it says, wives, submit yourself to your husbands, it doesn't mean you're less of a person. It just means there's an order in the home of authority, and you submit to that authority. And then it tells the husbands how to treat you with the proper kind of authority. But he says, you submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake. These are not ordinances of the Lord. These are ordinances of the speed limits and of the what you can do here and what you can't do there and all that. And they were very arbitrary in ancient times, to some degree. But they're also very arbitrary today. And I see this everywhere I go. It's arbitrary. It's just made up. Somebody makes up a rule and gets enforced. So you're supposed to submit to that. So you do it for the Lord's sake. Why should I? Well, people say, well, I don't like the president or the governor, so I'm not going to submit. Since I don't like Joe Biden, I'm not going to pay my taxes. This verse says that's wrong. This says you do not pay taxes because you like the president or the Congress. This says you pay taxes for the Lord's sake. Does that make sense? That's why you do it. It may not be why your neighbors do it, but why you do it as a Christian is for the Lord's sake. And that's true whether it's to the king as supreme or to governors or those who are all the way down this hierarchy or these various forms of authority that you have to submit to. You do this. And some of these governors and those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. That's the purpose of government. To punish evildoers and to protect those who are innocent or do good. This is repeated in Romans chapter 13. This is the purpose of human government. Human government was not an invention of man. It was created by God. And that's the purpose it has, is to punish evildoers and to praise those who do good. A good king or a good government in the United States, constitutional government, would do those very two things. It would punish the evildoers and praise those who are good. What we get upset about a lot of times, we think that's out of order. We think that good people are being punished and evil people are being protected. So we get real upset about that. And guess what? We should. We should get upset about that because that's all wrong. The question is, how do you react to that? How do you change that? Well, in some countries, it takes guns and rifles and revolutions to change that. Hopefully in this country, it just has people change their minds and we vote differently and we change that. But no, the government should not protect the guilty and should not punish the good. And when it does, God usually takes care of that over time. Over time, God and some other events usually will try to correct that. Not easy to do, though. That's why it's better not to let it happen. Where you get a government that punishes parents for objecting to certain things in schools and calls them terrorists, persecutes them. You don't want that. But you get that, then you have to fight to change that, which is what we're at right now. That kind of thing. And he says then, for this is the will of God, this, that you submit yourself, is the will of God, that by doing good, in this case, doing good is submitting, you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. So, you're taking away one of the things they can say bad about you. You're taking that away from them. They can't say it bad about you, that you're not a good citizen, that you disobey the laws, that you're just a bunch of rebels. See, the Romans tried to portray Christians, since they had a different religion, and I probably told you this 100 times, but some of the writers of the Romans called the Christians, their word for them were atheists. Atheists. How can that be? They believed in God. No, not to the Romans they didn't believe in God. They didn't believe in the gods. They believed in their own God, and that made them an atheist. So the Romans considered Christians to be atheists, people outside the bounds of ordinary society. And so they started the rumors then that Christians got together in these secret worship services, and they drank blood and ate flesh, that they were cannibals. They had these bloodthirsty orgies, and they always were talking about how much they loved each other. When they would see Christians, they would hug on each other. And they said they're just going there to have these wild sex orgies and eat blood, eat flesh, and drink blood. This is what the Roman historians, cultural thought about Christians. Now, you may think that's preposterous, but that's what they thought about them. Now, how would the fact, if you throw into that fact, and they don't even keep the laws, they think they're above all the laws that all of us have to keep, and they break all the laws because they think they're so important and they serve a different God. How would that work? Wouldn't work well at all, would it? So this is what he's saying here. You put to silence the ignorance of foolish men by being a respectable, responsible citizen of the country where you live. Boy, that chafes me. I just hate to read these verses. I'm telling you personally. I wish you'd say, Mike, you can just rebel all you want to keep the laws you want to keep. Anybody else feel that way? Any show of hands here? Come on, you bunch of cowards. You won't even raise your hand for that. There you go. Thank you, sir. Thank you. But see, that's not what this says. So if I'm going to submit to the Lord, then guess what else I have to submit to? The law of the land I live in. And that's why I believe in following politics. Oh, why are you involved in politics? It's so stupid. Politicians are all stupid. Okay, that's fine. Let all these other people pass all the laws you live by then. Let all of them pass all the laws and then see how that works out for you. Yeah, don't get involved in politics. Don't try to do what's right and make sure the laws are fair for everybody. Don't do that. That'd be good. Just let somebody else decide that. That's so stupid. Excuse me. That's not very effective. Okay, sorry. That's not the right way to do it. You should be involved. You should be thinking about what is the right and fair thing. Usually it's something you haven't thought of, but we're talking about the radio show this morning. I don't know if nobody probably heard it, but Gary and I we get on the radio, and we're speaking on behalf of you all here. We're not in favor of silencing other people on that station who have a different view of things. We don't get on there and try to make the radio show take off the air all these other radio shows that don't speak the truth. That's not our job. That's not our responsibility. That's not good. But we want to be able to say what we want to say freely. And so when somebody comes along and says, we want to have it so that there can be no hate speech on the radio. Oh, yeah, Christian, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Is it really a good idea that you pass a law there can be no hate speech on the radio? Sounds good to me. We don't need any hate speech. Well, okay. Who gets to define hate speech? Who gets to define that? See, never go that. Ignorant people, young people, they don't think that far ahead. Who gets to say what's hate speech? I guarantee you they will say what me and Gary are saying is hate speech. We get on there and say we don't really appreciate Pride Day that much. You're a hate. You hate speech. Yes, sir.
Mike, do you think that sometimes that you need to break God's law in order to achieve something?
You know, sometimes you need to break God's law to achieve what?
Like you said World War II about killing people. If they hadn't, we might be speaking German.
Well, there's nothing wrong with speaking German. My grandmother did.
I mean, nothing, you know what?
What you got against Germans? No. Here's how I would phrase what may. I don't know if this is what you're saying or not. First of all, I would question whether our involvement in World War II is breaking God's law. The Bible does not say, in truth, thou shalt not kill. Meaning you can't ever kill anybody. Because in that the translation is more correct in the modern version. Thou shalt not do murder. Because in that very chapter of Exodus 20, he goes and lists several kinds of capital punishment that kill people. So it doesn't mean you can't kill anybody. And we see that nations warring against nations in many ways is not good, but sometimes, like right there, how are you going to punish evildoers if you don't take up arms and punish some evildoers? Isn't it necessary at times to take up arms to fight evildoers? It is. So I would question the premise of whether we have to break God's law to do good. I don't think we can do evil that good may come. Now, on the other hand, is it necessary to break the laws of man sometimes? It is. Right. When Nebuchadnezzar said, bow down to this image, then, and he was the ruler, that was a law. When Nebuchadnezzar said, bow down to the image of the music plays, they didn't have a Congress to approve that, or a Supreme Court to approve that. That was the law. And so when Daniel and his other three friends said no, they wouldn't, they were breaking the law. And they were punished. They accepted their punishment. So if you think, for example, Mom, that you should protest a certain law that we have let's say you're going to protest, well, we should be protesting the sign ordinances they have here, for example. We should be picking. But let's just say say some law you don't like. And you want to protest that. Is that okay? I think in America it's perfectly legal to protest, isn't it? There isn't anything illegal about protesting per se. But then there comes a point where the government says, okay, that's enough, or you can't do this as your protest. Now then, when you go past that, of course, if you don't do anything illegal in a protest, it's not a very effective protest, is it? Look, I had to read Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau in high school more than once. I know what it says, essentially, it's been a long time ago, that the whole point of protesting and civil disobedience is breaking the law. When Martin Luther King broke the laws in Alabama and had a march, okay, you can think what you want about that. The one thing I admire about that is when they arrested him and put him in jail, he said, okay, I'm in jail. He wrote a letter from the jail. He took the punishment that was the law, what the law said for the crime he had committed. Was it a fair punishment? Okay, you can argue about that, but he disobeyed the law. That was the whole point of what he was doing, and he took the punishment for it. He didn't act like now the whole world has to come to an end and get me out of jail. He got out of jail. So, if you want to break the law, as let's say there's an abortion clinic opens up down the street here. I'm ashamed that I've never stood in front of an abortion clinic and protested. I am ashamed that I've never done that. I have neighbors who've done that. I've never done that. Maybe I should have. What would happen? What would you think of me if I was protesting from an abortion clinic and got arrested? What would you think of me? Most of you would think less of me for being arrested. Because now our preacher's a jail. What would they say? Well, that church has a preacher that's a jailbird. He's a criminal. Would it be wrong for me to get arrested to protest an abortion clinic? Would it be? I don't think so. I don't think it'd be a sin for me to get arrested. Now, if in the process of the protesting, I get violent and hit somebody or curse and swear, now that would be wrong. But not the protest itself, not even getting arrested. Because I think it's an unjust law. And in the United States, we have a right to protest unjust laws. That's our privilege to do that. So there are nuances to understanding all of this, you see. But the problem is, most state laws and government laws acknowledge that as long as you're within certain bounds of civility, you can protest. It's when you block traffic and throw paint on cars and you set things on fire, now then you get arrested for those things. Should Christians be involved in that? I don't think so. Should I burn down an abortion clinic as a Christian? I don't think so. That's outside the bounds of law to do that. Of really actual law, violence, to do that. So anyway, Bob, I don't have any idea if that answered your question or not. I just ran and raved for 10 minutes.
I think, you have the right to do things as long as it's, like you said, it's not violent or somebody gets hurt or something like that. You carry to security.
I don't think you have a right to violate God's law at any time. That's the point I would make.
Well, to protest, I don't think that's God's law that says you can't do that. I might be wrong now.
Now, my involvement in politics would be this, if I could restate it. What I would like to see happen in America, make sure it keeps this way in American politics, that my expressing my opinion in protesting I want to see the laws of our country stay within the bounds of God's laws, so I don't have to protest them. Okay? I want to see the laws of this country reflect in general the laws of God. And when they do, then there's no need for protesting. We can go to the legislatures and do the things we need to do to do that. But what's happened in my lifetime is the laws of the United States, and it was before that, were outside the bounds of, had become outside the bounds of God's law in many respects.
I think as long as you act within God's law, you're okay.
What's that?
If you don't break God's law by protesting, then I think it's okay.
I think that's what I'm saying. I think it's fine to do that. Now, people, you're going to hurt. You have to think about your reputation if that matters to you. But that's so be it. If it's a valid type of protest, it should be. We should be willing to take a hit of our reputation to object to certain things. And I can think of some I can't think of them at the moment. I thought some this week I was thinking about this very subject. But this says here that by doing the will of God, this is the will of God, I say, that by doing good, you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. Now, of course, the definition of good always has to be looked at in the context of doing good. What does it mean doing good here? Does it mean giving to the poor? Is that the context of doing good in this verse? What's the context of the doing good in verse 15? I think it's obeying every ordinance of man. That's the doing good that he's talking about. And when you do that, when you obey, and when you submit yourself to their authority, even if it's things you don't agree with, then you are doing good, and you will put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. They won't be able to make a charge against you that can stick. That will really stick. And are there exceptions to this where sometimes you can't obey? Yes, there are. We just discussed those. And so he says, got the first bell, Joel? Yes, I think it was. Verse 16 says, as free, you're free as a Christian. You're free from man's law in the sense that you live by God's law, but you're free. Don't use your liberty as a cloak for vice or wickedness, but as bondservants of God. Yes, you're free. You don't serve the king, you serve God. But some people would use that as a cloak then to serve their own lusts. That's not what it is. Honor all people. Honor, we talked about this a few weeks ago, means to esteem highly all people. Love the brotherhood. Love the people, other Christians around you. Fear God. Phobia, that's the word there. Fear God. Respect him. Honor the king. Hold the king in the proper honor by how you act. Now, this is Peter's statement about being subject to laws that would bring about Christians doing well in society as much as they can. He's going to talk later in the book about persecution, but there is a way that you can stave off persecution to some degree, and this is it. This is it. You take the Branch Davidians. Was he the one, David Koresh, out in Texas? Some of you are old enough to remember David Koresh. Just a cult out there, Christian cult, and they kept getting under more and more scrutiny. Of course, a lot of it was on about guns, but that's the kind of lever the government would use, gun law. This David Koresh fellow, he was the kind of fellow that put himself up pretty high. Brace yourself, I'm going to tell you some of his teaching. Why I think God destroyed him. He quoted the verse, and he believed he was like Jesus. And he had the scriptures say about the Messiah that he was anointed with the oil of gladness above his fellows. He said the oil of gladness was a reference to the sexual fluids that exchange between people when they have sexual relations. And that's why all the young women need to come to him to be anointed with the oil of gladness, that he would receive their oil of gladness, because he was the Messiah. That's what was going on in the Branch Davidian compound, based on his teachings in the Bible. You all were shocked, aren't you? You just thought it was about having automatic weapons. That may have been what was going on. Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever meet him?
Did I ever meet him? No, I never met David Koresh. You met him? What was he like?
Terrible person.
Terrible. Well, he probably came on to you, Sandy. That's the kind of fellow he was. No, I'm serious. You take advantage of every female around you.
He came on every woman in church. And honestly,
So I mean,
it was unbelievable what this man was doing. He was changing his wife with some other guy, and then he was going and getting a young woman, and he was just having.
that's right. Now the point is that brings disrespect on all other Christians to be like that, and the government eventually stepped in. They couldn't prove some of that stuff, or they tried to, but they got him on something else, or whatever it was, you see. So Did the government here punish evildoers? In some way they did, but other ways they just killed off a Christian that they didn't like. So I don't know. I have mixed opinions about it, but that's what was going on. Now we need to avoid that. That's not. We need to avoid that kind of against Christians, and always be honorable and reputable in how we deal with everybody. All right, our time is gone today. Thank you very much for your participation.